Hogstye.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Hogstye. It is I, your host with the most, Alex Zeese.
That's horrible, Alex.
Hey, at
God.
least, yeah, I know.
The host is the host with the most.
The host with the most.
This is your morning crew on WXKCXM in Iowa City. The host with the most.
Work-related thing. They're doing this event at my work, and they're like, we need somebody to MC this event who's got like a good DJ voice. And now I'm a contractor, so I'm not doing it, but I'm like, I do have like a podcast. I've done, I don't know how many.
Thousands of podcasts at this point.
Yeah.
You didn't volunteer yourself?
No, well, because I'm a contractor, I really can't be like their MC. It would look
outside
bad.
The scope of your duties.
Yes, outside the scope of duties. And it would look really bad for all these high-level people to be like, and here's the lowly contractor to do all the real work.
It's the AV guy.
All right. Well, I should just do introductions because it's not just our normal crew, everybody. We have Steve. Hi, Steve.
Hello.
We have Dave. Hey, Dave.
What up, fellas? And
welcome back to the show, Jamual. Jamual, welcome back, of course. I don't need to really introduce you. You were on here for what, 4 seasons? Everyone knows man, Jamual.
Nice to meet you guys. How's it hanging?
We just found Jamual out there in the mall and decided to invite this Jamual guy onto the show.
I figured you guys talk Washington, I'll talk Washington. Let's make a podcast.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of how this show got started, to be honest.
Yeah, kind of. Basically. And Jamual, of course, has been working for SB Nation for a while. You're still writing there. I know your podcast is going through a thing. We don't need to really get into that on the air here. But, good to have you back, bud.
Absolutely. It's been a little minute. I told Steve I was trying to get back on when the off season came around. So here we are. Unfortunately for Washington, the all season came in the same time it usually comes around, and that's at the end of week 17 or week 18. So it ended pretty early for us, and here we are.
Yeah.
But good to catch up, man. So let's talk a little bit of football.
Yeah.
Oh, trust me, I'm sure everyone's happy to have you back and saying, get that Opperman guy off the radio.
Oh, Jesus, we ain't going that.
Oh, if people want anyone off, it's probably me at this point.
Oh, I doubt that. I doubt that very
much.
Me.
It can't possibly be me.
Trust me, I hear enough every day how annoying my voice is, and I can't keep myself at bay, and I talk way too much. So.
But that's just your marriage and your work.
That's not the listeners, though, Dave, that's saying that.
All right. So, of course, we are going to talk about congratulations, everybody. You're in the first year of the NFL's history where there's no Pro Bowl now. There's a air quote Pro Bowl event, but they're not playing a football game anymore for the Pro Bowl this year. And I think you have to go back to like the 1930s or something when they didn't actually play the Pro Bowl. It's been around forever. It wasn't always a big deal, but it's kind of crazy.
I think it's kind of in vogue for people to just pee all over the Pro Bowl. I don't watch the Pro Bowl. It's terrible. But honestly, it's really not very fun to watch. And that's maybe I think it's why what Alex is talking about, for those of you living under rock, I think it's a flag football game now and some sort of like
it's a skills competition in flag football game. Yes.
Okay. And it was half a step from being flag football in the first place. So you might as well just, the players didn't play hard, any of it. It was just boring to watch. It wasn't good football. So the skills competition, at least that might be interesting. Kind of like, what was that old show in the 80s and 90s where they'd have the quarterbacks out there. It was like this quarterback skills competition.
Oh, yeah. And they would see who could throw it the farthest, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's more interesting than watching a Pro Bowl to me. So I might actually watch this, ironically.
That was one thing I actually enjoyed when I was a kid, all the actual passing competition, stuff like that and everything. NFL's fastest man and so forth.
Yeah.
I was lockdown. That held my attention because it was like just seeing like the talent, like that's the arm talent thing. Like when you see the quarterbacks throwing the moving targets or the bullseye things, and like that's the arm part that people don't see too much nowadays.
Oh, I forgot about the bullseye part of like I remember the one where they would basically just try and shot put the ball, but I forgot there was like a moving target thing at one point.
That's far more interesting than a boring, pointless exhibition game that their players aren't interested in playing.
I don't know about far more, but it is more interesting. But the Pro Bowl had like a zero interest factor, and somehow when they moved it away from being in Hawaii, I think it made it so much worse.
I think the players made more of an effort to go if it was in Hawaii, and when you move it to the States, like. I mean, isn't in Vegas this year. I mean, for normal people, it might be fun to have a Vegas trip, but for rich football players who have nothing to do in the off season,
right,
that's probably not that interesting for them.
I think they put it in Orlando one year, which doesn't sound appealing at all if you're a football
unless
player.
You're a Disneyland fan, perhaps,
right?
Disney World,
maybe. But yeah, taking it out of an exotic location, I think hurt it, honestly.
There were some good visuals with the Hawaii thing. You had the overhead shots of the beach, and you could have hula girls, and it was probably more visually appealing. Also, probably cost more to put on.
Oh, I'm sure.
Pulling everything out to Hawaii, yeah.
Although I'm also assume that the stadium was basically free, and they're like, well, it's advertising for our weird little.
I'm sorry. Did you say? You don't listen to It's Us Business, do you?
Well, it was a college stadium that they played
at.
You
can't just walk in and say, I'm going to sign up to use your stadium. There's fees associated with this, especially when you're a multi-billion-dollar company.
My point is, I'm sure they kept the fees low because it's the only exposure Hawaii football ever got.
Well, if like you wanted to rent out like a basketball stadium for a night,
right?
It's not as much as you might think. Think like between 20 and 50 grand at most. Sure. It's not that much. And so a stadium, there's going to be a fee. I mean, it won't be free. It won't be millions of dollars, but they have to pay.
No. But yeah, so long Pro Bowl. And I guess, are they still doing the awards? Whatever it is, the like NFL awards, award show they do?
Yeah, February 9th.
Okay.
Whatever it is, I assume that's a Friday or Saturday.
Is that where they announced the MVP, Rookie of the Year and all that?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, which quarterback will automatically win MVP because we don't give it to anybody else?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, who's the odds-on favorite for that? I mean, right now, you think?
Well, right now it's neck to neck with Hurts and Mahomes right now.
That's what I would think. Yeah, Hurts is who I was thinking of.
Yeah. What quarterbacks are in the Super Bowl, Steve? Because it's pretty much going to be one of them every time.
Yeah. But aren't there other players in the NFL? Does it always have to be quarterback?
I wish they would just get rid of the MVP and just have quarterback of the year and then football player of the year, and those be two separate categories.
Football player.
Yeah, football player of the year.
I don't even care enough to speculate too much more on it than that.
I think that's probably the most appropriate because I about to say I don't even. They do got to find a way to kind of separate it because it's become a one position award thing unless you have an elite talent at receiver. Like it's really a skill position thing. I mean, obviously so, and it's a little biased, but you got to find a way to kind of open it up to the field.
Yeah, well, you would think that the NFL would be a little willing to do it, but they are always resistant to change and things like that for some reason. I mean, talking about MVPs, though, obviously, I think we should talk about the fact that the MVP of the league for the last 2 decades, Tom Brady, has announced he's retiring again. We'll see if this one lasts more than, 3 months, this retirement.
I don't think there's I got to get out of the house and leave my battle axe behind issue now.
No, that is part of it.
And that is from the perspective of Tom Brady's mind. I'm not calling all women battle axes, just to be clear.
Right.
I think he's done this time. And he's about to. I think he's turning 45, if not 45. Like he always said, he was playing that number. Like I think he's done.
Well, that and also he sucked this year, and it's only going to get worse
compared to normal Tom Brady. Yes.
Yeah, suck relative. Yeah, I'll take his numbers and watch in a heartbeat.
Well, this brings up a good question. Numbers.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking about here today is where does Tom Brady really and truly rank in the pantheon of NFL quarterbacks all time? I think there's no debate about him being the most accomplished, right?
Oh, no. I mean,
That's
statistically,
inarguable.
he's got every record. Yeah.
Well, he doesn't have every record, but he's won the most Super Bowls. He played for 20 years, all of that. So a little context here. Drew Brees has the highest all-time completion percentage, 67%. Quarterback ratings, Aaron Rodgers, all-time leader in quarterback ratings, 103.6. Tom Brady's at 97.2. Tom Brady's completion percentage career is 64.3. I mean, the gross stuff, yardage, he's way ahead of everybody because he's played so long.
Right.
Touchdowns, way ahead of everybody. But some of those back kind of numbers, not so much. Like TD percentage, you want to get into that, 5.4% TD percentage. Some of that stuff is a little bit lower. So you can make an argument. And the other thing is none of these are adjusted for era. Because you go back,
almost impossible to adjust.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, baseball tries. You go back to like Johnny Unitas days. It's just a totally different game.
Right.
So I'll throw it out there. Let's start with Jamual because you're our guest, I guess, sort of. For you, where does Tom Brady rank in terms of greatest quarterbacks and greatest players ever?
So I'm going in blindly. I'm not even looking at any numbers. I'm not looking at any players in front of me. I'm going off the top of my head. I'm gonna say I'm going quarterback. I'm not gonna do this player thing. Actually, you know what? I'll give it a shot. I'll give a shot with the players too. Quarterback, I'm gonna say unquestionably top 5. If I had to put a number on it, I may have to say 3. And I don't have 2 particular people in front of them, but I think there are several people or a couple people you can make a case for like number 1 and number 2. And I'm giving respect to the people who I haven't seen play. That's Dan Marino, Joe Montana, Steve Young, like those guys that I hadn't seen play. So I'm leaving those 2 slots open, but I'm going to give Tom Brady number 3. In terms of players, I think he's top 10. I think he's a top 10 player of all time. Like, he's not the best athlete, but as competitive as he is, the throws that he makes, the composure that he has in big moments, and the fact that he's so cerebral and studied the game to the point where he can dictate the game, but also understand what you are going to try to counter with, and he has a counter for your counter. Like all those things, like having that cerebral mindset in order to compete on a high level, and show that you can do it for 20 plus years. He's a top 10 player in the game, unquestionable.
Fair enough.
So that's as far as I can give you.
It really is hard to, and just for my own context, I started pulling up like the list of current Hall of Fame quarterbacks, people who are in the Hall of Fame, who obviously would be who you comp Brady to, if you're trying to say, is he the greatest ever? But because of the era thing, like Terry Bradshaw threw 14 passes a game most times, something like that.
His completion percentage isn't that high either.
No.
Right. But compared to the rest of the league at his time, he was very, very good. He was probably in the top. I don't know off the top of my. I'm guessing he was top 5 completion percentage almost every season. Terry Bradshaw.
Certainly in that realm.
Yeah, but again, you threw 14, 15 passes. They were all deep shots, and you maybe completed half of them. That's just the way the game was played.
So for context, Terry Bradshaw's numbers read like a guy who would be benched
now
in today's world.
His
like career completion percentage 51.9.
Mm-hmm.
Career quarterback rating 70.9. 5.4% interception rating. I mean, those numbers would not be NFL quality numbers in today's world. It was such a different game.
Oh yeah, no question. And you could do that with Sonny. You could do that with Terry Bradshaw, Johnny Unitas, like you were saying before. Name it. But they're all Hall of Famers. The thing I've always come back to in that part of the comparison is, if you put Tom Brady in another era, how well does he survive? And I don't know if he does. I still think the level of toughness that those guys had to have to play quarterback in their era, Tom Brady would have been broken in half very quickly.
He's a bit whiny.
He's very whiny. He's very thin-skinned, relative to what those guys acted like back then. Compared to modern players, he's normal. But go ahead, Jamal.
No, I was just gonna say, I think your argument is somewhat fair, and it's fair in what you just stated about him being divas, but I think somewhat in the sense of like he wasn't always like that. Like early on in his career, he wasn't as vocal to the referees or anything like that. Like So I think early in his career, if you want to kind of compare eras, I think he would have been the same. He would have been the same person, the same dog that he is now, or even early on in his career, he would have been the same in a different era. I just think in terms of the calls part, he probably started feeling more comfortable to do and behave that way because of the name that he created behind himself.
Oh yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. Like I think he would have survived. That's ultimately what I'm saying. I think he would have survived in a different era.
The one thing that, and I'm right with Jamal in terms of number. I put him right about 3. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I wouldn't even put him any higher than that. And I'm one of the guys. I'm very steadfast on Joe Montana being the greatest to ever play the position, and people always look at me like I'm crazy, because his numbers overall may not look great in terms of his completion percentage, only over 62%. He has a few years where it was over 66%. But the thing about Montana, when you talk about the era he came in, it wasn't a passing league in terms of protecting the quarterbacks the way that they do. I mean, look at the concussions he sustained going into the playoffs against the Giants, and it was like the 86 season, I think it was, and he missed the rest of the playoffs because of it. I mean, there were no flags thrown to protect these quarterbacks at all. But he came into a system with Bill Walsh, with the West Coast system that redefined how the offensive passing game worked. It was that was the first time you've seen an offense to where everything was predicated on anticipatory throws, timing routes. A lot of his interceptions came because he was placing the ball where the receiver was supposed to be. But the ball got there, receiver wasn't there, and then you have the safety coming in and picking it off. You had those scenarios and so forth. But I've never seen a quarterback engineer an offense in crunch time the way Joe Montana has. I mean, there's a reason why he was called Joe Cool. I mean, that Super Bowl against Cincinnati, coming down to that one final drive I think it was 98 yards to win the game, and everyone came in the huddle, and the first thing Montana did was point up to the booth to go, "Hey, look, there's John Candy." And people were just like, "Really?"
Coolness personified.
Right. Dude, it was just
not rattled.
Any time you needed a clutch play, him and John Elway were 2 guys that would give you those clutch moments time and time and time again. No defenses is what affect John Elway for so long. Having no running game except for his legs, which he wasn't exactly like Michael Vick here either, but he was a good running quarterback at the same time. Those are 2 guys that I put over top of Brady, because I think those guys, you put them in this era of football right now. One, I don't think Brady and the Patriots win as many Super Bowls as they do, and 2, I don't think Brady would be considered the unanimous number 1 quarterback year in and year out. That's where I am with all that.
Yeah, for me, I'm not far from where you guys are with it. I've always said I think that if I had to start a team with any quarterback from any era, it'd probably be John Elway. And if you look at his numbers, they don't compare, completion percentage for all these reasons we're saying. But to me, he's the quarterback personified. And a couple other guys, Jamal mentioned Dan Marino.
Yeah.
If you have to write a book about the exact perfect way to be a pocket passing NFL quarterback, Dan Marino is your archetype. There's nobody that's ever had better form. There's nobody that's ever had a quicker release. He is the model passer above all else, I think. Him. And I would put Peyton Manning. I would probably the one out there. I would probably take Peyton Manning over Brady too. Yeah, I think Peyton is so smart, unbelievably smart guy. In terms of football smart, I don't know, academically, I don't know, but football smart, brilliant at the line. I think more brilliant than Brady. And Peyton was hurt in multiple coaches and some less than stellar teams sometimes. So I think I would put those guys over Brady, maybe.
Yeah.
And if you go way back, I mean, all of us are too young for guys like Unitas. Some of the, Sammy Baugh,
Otto, all those
Otto,
guys.
yeah, it's hard to
even
judge.
Staubach, I thought
Staubach was great. I mean, I know everybody hates Dallas and all that, but Staubach's another one. Now, all of us were basically too young for Staubach. I mean, Dave and I were probably alive when he was playing, but we don't remember.
Right.
Yeah, no, right.
So that's my thought. Is certainly congratulations to great. And the other guy, really, if you could make a statistical case, you could maybe make a case for Aaron Rodgers if he plays another couple years and doesn't smoke his ayahuasca, too much.
Yeah.
He's number one, like I said, number one in NFL history, quarterback rating, 59,000 passing yards, a better completion percentage than Brady. Where Rodgers hurt is he didn't have all the Super Bowls. You know?
Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point on Peyton Manning. I always thought that Peyton Manning was probably too smart for his own good, because I thought there were times when he was making adjustments and calls at the line he really didn't have to make. And I think he did a lot of that against Belichick, because Belichick was such a strategist on defense. He was just, I got to overcome whatever he's throwing at me. And sometimes I think Belichick played into that and forced him to make decisions he shouldn't have made. But
he might have outsmarted himself sometimes. There's something to be said for that.
Yep.
You hear that about people who are very high IQ, especially when it's like job specific IQ, that they do that a lot.
I have to deal with this burden every day, Alex, in my own life.
I'm not going to compare him to guys we didn't see. That's not fair. I would put Elway over him. I would definitely put Montana over him. Probably Marino. I think so. When you get to the guys who his career overlapped, namely, I think if you're talking the greats of all time, that's going to be Brett Favre, Peyton Manning. Favre, was at the end of his career when Brady's was really getting going, right? But there's probably 5-10 years of overlap there, something like that.
To me, Brett Favre was too much of a gambler.
Sure.
He hurt his team a lot with all the interceptions and all that,
but he did leave when he retired, he had every record or the touchdown and passing records.
Well, he wants some. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying good and bad. I was agreeing with Alex.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
he was gunslinger personified. What he was.
Right. Totally different type of quarterback versus Manning and Brady.
You just kind of have to take the good with the bad with Favre a little bit, is all. And when it went south, when he started getting older, it really didn't work because of the way he played,
Right. But, Aikman, I would take Brady over Aikman. Just thinking of some of the big quarterbacks who I definitely saw a lot of, through my life.
Well, Aikman was the beneficiary of some really incredible running games and Hall of Fame receivers. Yeah. And if you want Favre numbers, so Favre, 71,800 passing yards, quarterback, which is fourth all time now behind Manning, Breeze, and Brady. Rating wise is where he suffers. He's got an 86 career quarterback rating, which is way down the list. And and then he's going to have, I haven't done interception rate here. Give me 1 second. but that's going to be really, really high.
Yeah, because he was a 2-to-1 guy, which was the norm back then. So it wasn't outrageous at the time he played. All right, I'll give you one last name,
right.
Steve Young. Does Steve Young's best career years surpass Brady in terms of all-time greats?
First of all, I have a hard time being objective about Steve Young because
Is it because you want to be the best Steve? And
that's not even a question. I know that. I'm not threatened by that. It's that those San Francisco teams were sort of Washington's competitor back then.
Sure.
And I've always kind of held that against them. I don't. That's a tough one, man.
Because he was very, very good.
He was, but I think that Brady did more with less than did Steve Young. So I'd probably take Brady over Young.
I agree with that. I would take Brady over Young myself too.
So yeah, I have Brady at round 5 then, I think.
5.
Somewhere in that range for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one quarterback though that has to have consideration if he was in a better system as opposed to that run and shoot that he ran in Houston would be Warren Moon. You want to talk about a quarterback that would thread the needle with a 90-mile-an-hour throw. His arm was an unbelievable talent.
Well, and if he hadn't been stuck in, how long was he in the CFL? He was there for like 5, 6, a long time.
Wow,
right?
yeah.
Oh, CFL, yeah. 5 years.
Yeah.
And it was like 1 year in the like 1 year in the USFL, wasn't he?
Right. Yeah. Like half his career, like I remember when Favre retired, the discussion was technically Warren Moon had thrown for more yards professionally. It's just he had played in those other leagues and they weren't counting him.
Well, so Warren Moon.
Yeah.
Pro Football Reference only has
his NFL stuff.
Yes, and he is at 49,000 career yards from 1984 to 2000 when he retired.
He retired that late?
Well, he was a backup I didn't even remember this, but he was a backup in Kansas City for 2 years, and he played. Yeah, and so for 1999 2000, he has won a total of 3 games in those 2 years with 1 start. The last year he was a starter was in 98 with the Seahawks.
Okay. I did not remember him still being around in 2000.
And by the way, rest in peace to Warren Moon. I mean, he got murdered under wacky circumstances, did he not? Wasn't that him?
No, that's
that was Steve McNair.
Oh, I'm sorry. McNair. Yeah. Warren Moon is not dead. Forget I said that.
No, Warren Moon had some other issues going on, but he's not dead. Yeah.
Yeah, he's still alive and kicking.
Okay, one more
Hopefully
stat.
Not kicking, but
Well, yeah. One more stat question, we can move on here. See if you guys can get it.
Okay.
The all-time lowest career interception rating for a quarterback with more than 100 starts, which is the way I've sorted these stats. What player? And the hint is it's nobody off the beaten path.
Wait, say it again.
The quarterback with the lowest career interception percentage in NFL history with quarterbacks for over 100 starts.
I believe that's Drew Brees, isn't it?
1 vote for Drew Brees. Jamal?
I said Aaron Rodgers.
Okay, Alex?
I lean Aaron Rodgers, assuming it's active guys too.
No, including everybody. Oh yeah, it's Rodgers. Rodgers 1.4. Drew Brees is down at 2.3. So it goes Rodgers at 1.4, Brady at 1.8, Russell Wilson 1.9, then Derek Carr, believe it or not, and Jared Goff tied at 2.
Huh.
So there you go.
Jared Goff's up there. I would not have expected that one.
I wouldn't have expected that. And the guy who's out of the left field would be Neil O'Donnell at 2.1.
Isn't he a coaching guy now? Like, isn't he one of those hot names?
I don't know. And by the way, so the ones that Washington fans will hate, guess who is tied for 10th?
Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
Kirk Cousins, yeah.
Tied, ironically, with Donovan McNabb. So there you go.
I would not have expected McNabb.
No, as many balls he threw in the dirt.
Yeah.
surely some of those got picked off. Of course, if they're in the dirt,
No. The ones that got picked off were all those like 40-yard shot put things he did to Todd Pinkston all the time.
He didn't, 2.2 is pretty good. That was 10th all time.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. Oh, well, congratulations, Tom Brady. Not that you need it from a little podcast.
Go hang out with some other models now.
Yeah. Some models who were born after you started playing, probably.
Probably. Yeah. You can become the Leonardo DiCaprio of athletes.
Yeah. Well, why not go? All right. Why don't we move on? So let's do the sad news first. If you didn't hear, it was announced a few days ago. Bobby Beathard passed away. If you don't know who Bobby Beathard is, I don't know how you'd be listening to this podcast, honestly. Yeah, kind of a big deal in Redskins history. He was the architect behind the Glory Days, who worked with Joe Gibbs on building all those teams that won all those Super Bowls for us here in DC. 4-time Super Bowl winner in his career as a GM. 2 here in DC, and then I believe, he went to San Diego after. They didn't win the Super Bowl, though, did they?
He was with the Dolphins in 72.
That's right. He was with the Dolphins in their Glory Days, too. From what everyone I've heard talk about him, and like Rick Snyder, I was listening to him talk about him on the radio. Dude was a workaholic, and that was the key to his real success. Is he was just leaving no stone unturned, looking for talent at all times.
He number one, he was with Washington from 78 through 88, and then he spent another bunch of years with the Chargers after that as general manager. I think people who are too young to have lived through it, some of you out there may have sort of a mistaken impression of the role that Joe Gibbs played in these early days. Because we think of Joe Gibbs now, understandably, we on this show think of him as kind of Saint Joe and all of that. And when he was here in, his second tenure, he was kind of running everything. But back in the early 80s, that was utterly not the case. Joe was a guy who was hired kind of out of nowhere. Bobby Beathard was the guy in charge, and Joe Gibbs was not picking these players. It was Bobby Beathard who was in charge of all that, and Gibbs had input and all that. We're huge Gibbs fans. I'm not trying to disparage him, but Bobby Beathard, more than anybody, was the architect of the talent that Joe Gibbs molded into Super Bowl champions. And so it should not be lost on anybody who's too young what a major, major role that Bobby Beathard played. So rest in peace.
I think fans today, and, I include myself in this, we think of how the modern NFL is with, free agency, with the salary cap, and how teams are built now. And it's just totally different from what they had to do back in the 70s and 80s, where if you drafted a guy, he was pretty much yours for good. Unless you cut him, guys weren't ever hitting free agency. So, you had to find talent, especially draft it and develop guys. Now, you could they were a lot more flexible in terms of stashing players, and you had, 15 rounds in the draft or something ridiculous at that point, too?
Yeah, something like that, along those lines, yeah.
Right, so, if you had you had a lot more chances to hit, but it was just a totally different era. Quarterbacks were not first-round picks ever. A lot of those great quarterbacks back in those days were late-round picks, except for that famous, 83? When all those elite quarterbacks were drafted?
Yeah, it was 83.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, building a great team like he did repeatedly, that was a different type of talent back then.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's certainly sad to see him go. I remember when he had his Hall of Fame induction that he couldn't speak because of his medical problems, and Joe Gibbs
either
had
dementia
to
or
talk for him.
Alzheimer's or something.
Yeah. So he's been suffering for a while. So certainly our condolences to him and his family.
Well, and having gone through that kind of, there is a little bit of relief for the family, I think, in the end. you hate seeing a family member suffer. So hopefully they find peace with it.
Just take the time if you're under about 40, 35 or 40, just take some time to go back and read about him and understand the legacy he played for the Redskins, because I can promise you they wouldn't have 3 Super Bowls without him.
No.
They might not have one without him.
No, probably not. Because even though he left for that last one, it was still his team.
It was his team.
Yeah, Casserly was the GM, but that roster was still the same roster.
Charlie Casserly is the guy I have met and talked to, and he reminds me of an accountant.
He's definitely an accountant. I ran into him once at Nats Park, and I just talked to him very briefly. But let's just say he's a tuck your polo shirt into your khakis at the ballpark guy.
Yeah, he is. That's exactly what he is.
Definition of accountant. Not much else we can say about Beathard.
Nope.
Safe home. All right. Do you want to talk about? I'll leave it up to you guys. Do you want to talk about those 2 games that happened, or do we want to talk about the Washington offensive coordinator search that will never end?
Well, let's go to the offensive coordinator search first, because we have a whole nother week to talk about the Super Bowl. We'll get to that at the end of the show, but let's do OC first.
Okay. All right. We can do OC first. So the big story, there was one more name added to the list of people they're planning on interviewing, and it's a kind of a surprise one, in my opinion. Eric Bieniemy, who's right now the Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator behind Andy Reid. When I say that, I mean because Andy Reid actually calls the offense. Bieniemy doesn't do the X's and O's and play calling. But he works under Andy Reid, and apparently he's interested in interviewing, and Ron really wants to interview him for the OC position here after the Super Bowl. It sounds it's after the Super Bowl.
I'm trying to think of an analogy that's not going to get me in trouble, and I can't come up with one. So I'll just say that I don't understand why Eric Bieniemy would want to leave a Super Bowl team for a team in which is mediocre at best, and the coach is going into year 4?
Well, his contract runs after this year.
That's true.
So he's no longer. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, I mean, here's what I've heard about Eric Bieniemy over the years, because everybody wonders why he's not a head coach. I've heard he's a terrible interview. That's what I've heard about him. People have told me this like off the record and stuff. It's like reporters we've talked to. I don't have sources. Don't get me misunderstand. But I've always heard that Eric Bieniemy does not interview well, and that is why he's perennially an OC. I don't know if that's true, but I mean, I don't know why the Chiefs would get rid of him. I don't get it personally. I mean, I think Washington should take him if they can. Don't misunderstand me, but I don't really get it.
I just think it's a.
Go ahead, Jamal.
I just think it was a situation for, it is a situation for Eric where, you had a really good run in Kansas City. You had a really good run. Now, it's 2 sides of the coin. I'm about to talk about one side, but you had a really good run in Kansas City with Pat Mahomes. I ain't gonna lie to y'all, he's probably already cemented himself as a top 10 quarterback of all time. So I'm gonna just say a great quarterback. But you also had experience before Pat Mahomes. Point being, you were under Andy Reid for an extended period of time, a very long extended period of time. As a running backs coach and as an offensive coordinator, your experience that you've accumulated over that time is unspoken for, or just something that we can't like wrap in our brain from the outside in, and people who aren't even in football as detailed as they are. But he's accumulated so much knowledge where he's at the point where, like, all right, well, if I want to get up from under Andy and have an opportunity to grow and call my plays, design an offense based on what I've come to know, what Andy does and tendencies that he's taught me to pick up on, etc. All these things, I'm not going to be able to grow under Andy. I can take an opportunity with a team who's going to allow me to get that job done. And that looks like that can be the Commanders. And also look like it could be a couple other destinations who new head coaches or current head coaches with open OC jobs are looking for a person who can hold things down on the offensive side of the football. And Eric Bieniemy has greatly contributed to the preparation and planning for the Chiefs offense, but he hasn't been the one that solely ran the ship. And it's not a knock. I don't even think that should be a knock on anybody when you're under Andy Reid. And I think that's the mistake that everybody does, that everybody has when it comes to Bieniemy, is automatically trying to discredit the fact that, he doesn't call the plays. Well, who would you choose? Andy Reid or anybody, the field? Like, I'm choosing Andy Reid 10 times out of 10. Like, he is the best when it comes to that stuff, and you're learning under him. So, like, I think that people try to call it as a knock, but they don't look at the other intangible items that you pick up from just being a coach under Andy Reid on that side of the ball. Like, and that's kind of where I'm at to say all that, to say he may be looking for opportunities outside of Andy Reid, despite the fact that he can have a great run with Patrick Mahomes. He's had it. He's had 2 Super Bowl trips. He's had 3 Super Bowl trips. And he's on the verge of possibly winning 2. I'm not saying that he will win against Philly, but he's on the verge. He could possibly go 2-1 under Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes, and it could be time to move on. So there goes the opportunity for Washington, having that chance to get a coach who just wants to grow.
No, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%, Jamal. I think Bieniemy is definitely in that position where it's like the only way he's going to get anywhere in this league as a potential future head coach is to get out from under the shadow of Reid and Mahomes. Try to construct his own offense, move on to somewhere else. And what better place would be than Washington? Because if Ron Rivera could, one or two things could happen. Either Ron Rivera may do what Arians did down in Tampa and just kind of set the enemy up to take over for Ron Rivera if Ron Rivera is looking to retire after this year or something, or if Ron Rivera falls flat this year, he gets fired. The enemy is already in place in house, kind of already kind of interviewing or in a way for the job for next year anyway. So I think it's offensively, it's not really attractive in turn because they have no quarterback. The offensive line is pretty terrible. I get all that, Steve. You're right about that. But in terms of going forward, this could be an opportunity for him to not only just come in and call his own plays, but an opportunity of actually getting an inside track of maybe taking over a head coaching job for Washington if Ron Rivera doesn't get past this year, maybe too. But all in all, I think out of everything, I think mainly he wants to move on, maybe not to Washington, but just move on, like what Jamal said, to get out of the shadow of Reid and Mahomes, because he has not been able to get a head coaching job being in their shadow to this point.
So, and since we mentioned the head coaching jobs, there's only 2 left. If what I'm able to find is correct. Broncos. Sean Payton just got hired for the Broncos. They traded another first-round pick away to get Sean Payton. By the way, Broncos seem to hate first-round picks, so traded them for Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. Good luck to them. Texans hired DeMarco Ryans. Or DeMarco or D'Amico?
It's D'Amico.
D'Amico. Yeah, and then the Panthers hired Frank Reich. So it's Arizona and the Colts are the only 2 jobs left for a head coach. I don't know if either of those looks particularly appealing to.
Wasn't the Colts a train wreck? I mean, I would. If you had to pick one, both
of those teams are a train wreck.
Yeah, but I would probably pick Arizona if you made me pick one. Those 2.
Yeah, probably. Yes.
In terms of Bieniemy, I get what you guys are saying, but I mean, at the end of the day, he'd be coming to a team that may have an ownership change and a head coach who's headed into year 4. That's not a good situation that hot OCs normally want to walk into. It might make more sense if the owner wasn't changing, and you could sort of be implicitly set up, maybe not openly, but kind of under the table set up to take over. But that just might not be the case. So if I were
Mhm.
Eric advising him, I get what y'all are saying, and I think you made a good case to think that maybe Bieniemy would want to move on from the Chiefs, which I hadn't thought about, and that's good points. But I don't know if Washington would be the choice for me if I were him, just because it's a tough situation, and you may be gone in a
Well,
year.
the other team that I think it's been very publicly known that is also interviewing him is Baltimore, which is probably a far better destination for him.
Well,
If
and
you
you have
yeah.
a similar, assuming that Baltimore can somehow wrangle in Lamar Jackson, you'd have
Hmm.
a quarterback along those sort of the same lines as Mahomes, who can run and move, and not as
Yeah,
good a passer probably, but I mean,
but he is a up there, not superstar elite, but he's up
well,
there
he won a
in the
league
top.
MVP. I mean, he's elite. He's just not an elite as a passer. He's elite as a
Right.
player.
Right. I mean elite as like he's not Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, one of these guys, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, different skill set, but I would imagine if you're a really good OC and you see a different skill set like that, your brain just starts churning. What can I do with it? What could I do with it? And that probably has appealed to a lot of offensive
And
minds.
just like, by the way, as an offshoot of this, Lamar, if you're listening, call me and I'll get you hooked up with an agent, or I just send me the contract. I'll read it for you, because that man desperately needs an agent, like in the
Yeah,
worst way. You were look, I enjoy watching him play football, Lamar, but you're the worst agent I've ever seen. Really, you're terrible. So
I
you need to
understood
find
the
someone.
idea of I want to be my own because
Because I'm too cheap to pay 6%. That's what
right.
it is.
Well, I know, but that 6% is a lot of money when it comes down to these
Yeah,
big
but if you
numbers.
can make more by having an agent, it will
Right.
all come out better in the wash.
I
So
guess.
Lamar, if you're listening, give me a jingle. Email us at thehogsty@gmail.com. I'll get you hooked up.
And you only had to pay him 2%.
Well, I say I'm not a licensed agent, so I wouldn't be able to charge him anything.
You
Okay, well,
well,
2% tip then.
Yeah,
you
tip.
wouldn't be able to charge him a percentage. You could charge him a flat fee,
No, I
maybe.
can't do that either because of my
Oh,
current
really?
job will not allow me to do that. So,
Oh, right. Your current job has rules.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm offering my services for free, Lamar.
Pro bono.
Exactly.
Um, let's see. And then we see Lamar somehow ends up in a Washington uniform just because Steve will
I'm not.
mess with him.
I mean, you could do worse. I just don't think. Well, I said this before. I don't think Washington's coaching staff would be the good fit for him.
I don't think so either. All right. So the other story was Rivera was out in California. He was playing Pebble Beach, and everyone made a big stink about that because they're like, "Why isn't he at the Senior Bowl watching these guys
This
with
is
the
the
GM?"
stupidest story that's
It
ever
is,
been printed.
but he apparently was in California for a good reason because he was also interviewing Anthony Lynn, who's another coaching candidate for the OC position. We talked a little bit about Lynn last week, but since Jamal's here, Jamal, do you have any thoughts or opinions about Anthony Lynn?
Nothing in great detail. I mean, I viewed this offensive coordinator search as like I don't even know like the right word to describe it, so I'll try to be quick with my roundabout way. It's not like I understand how important it is to run, but like it doesn't move me. Like I have people that I'm intrigued about, right? Anthony Lynn
Right.
is one of them. I'll break it up. Anthony Lynn is one person I'm intrigued about. I'm intrigued with Eric Bieniemy. I'm intrigued with Thomas Brown, who is the assistant coach in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm even intrigued with Charles London, the running backs coach in Atlanta. Like I'm intrigued about these guys, and to an extent, I'm intrigued with Greg Roman, just to see what things could look like here. But like, do I have a overwhelming favorite? No. Do I think that it would benefit Washington and even Ron Rivera to bring in a veteran, even if they don't have that much experience, right? In terms of play calling, yes, I think it benefits Ron Rivera in Washington. I think that Anthony Lynn is a person who actually fits the mold of a veteran and a person who has called plays before. It's how he got the job in San Diego. He was an offensive guy, and I think that you can place him in Washington, and he's under the Kyle Shanahan tree to an extent. So you can think of like West Coast principles. You can think of zone scheme runs. Like to what extent, I don't know. I haven't studied his offenses and anything like that, but I'm just going off a baseline. It interests me. But that's all I can really say about I can copy and paste that for a lot of the candidates. Because it's just I just don't know where they're headed, and I don't know who they can get. Like Anthony Lynn too. Another thing, I was just reading a couple hours ago, Josina Anderson reported that kind of like a follow up to what we already knew, but she had said that Washington followed up in somewhat of an informal way with Anthony Lynn to see if he was interested in taking the job. And some people assume that meant like he was about to get offered the job, but it also can be like something where they're asking him, "Yo, if we want to like formally go about this, like, would you be interested? Would we not be wasting our time if we, conducted our interviews and went forward with the interview process?" Like that doesn't mean that Anthony Lynn is guaranteed the job, but I think my point of bringing that up with Josina Anderson is that I don't know if with Anthony Lynn's name being out there, I don't know if he's even interested in taking the job yet. It may be the case that Ron Rivera is like casting a wide net and hoping that he can land somebody.
My thoughts. I don't have any strong opinions on Anthony Lynn necessarily in particular. Like I said last week, I think the choice for Ron Rivera needs to be made with the eye of what kind of offense he thinks he wants to run. What kind of offense will fit the talent best, and then find the coordinator who is an expert at that system. I mean, that's what he needs to do. Who that is, I don't know. We'll see when it happens. But that's my thought. He needs to. It can't just be like who the guy he likes the best. It's got to be someone who really is an expert in the system he in particular wants to run.
There's no question that, and I mean, you can just look at the resumes of these names that we're listing. These are all running back guys. I mean, and the team was very public. We want to be a run first team, which, you might like, you might dislike as a fan, but if that's what they want to do, hiring guys who are all running backs coaches makes a lot of sense. All right. The only thing that I think it comes down to then is zone scheme versus power versus, inside versus outside. Like, where do you want to butter your bread?
Well, what's weird is they're not that great a running team. I mean, they ran a lot in the second half of the season because they weren't a great passing team. They do have talent at the receiver, but the quarterback, like I wrote a column this week. I think it was this week. I've slept
Wednesday.
Since then. Yeah. But I did an analysis of Brian Robinson's stats, if anybody saw this, and tried to do a deep dive into it. And what I found is his kind of deep dive stats aren't that good in comparison to who the other rookies around him. Brian Robinson. He didn't break a lot of tackles, not a lot of yards after contact. He got hit in the backfield an awful lot, as Dave, you've pointed out a lot. That's a function of the offensive line more than anything. But he's not gaining a ton of yards after that. I like Brian Robinson. I think he ought to start, but I think there's the guy who jumped out of the page at me after looking at that was Dameon Pierce. That dude was way ahead in a lot of metrics. That would be the guy who I think was the best rookie running back last year. But point is, they need to find we all know the offensive line. Washington needs to find a quarterback who can maximize the talent in the wide receiver core. They don't need to just be like the 1981 John Riggins, Redskins. They need to find a quarterback who can pass consistently and use the talent they have at wide receiver. In terms of who offensive coordinator, I mean, I don't know, but that's what they need to do. They don't need to focus on just running.
No, and if you're gonna focus on the receivers, then you actually need an OC who knows how to scheme receivers open.
Bingo.
Because they did not have that these last few years. There's a lot of, hey guys, all run into the same area, and something will happen. I don't know. Yeah.
I think the most intriguing part with Lynn for me is when he was in San Diego calling plays out there, he ran a lot of power sets. He ran a lot of power runs, not much zone schemes. From what I can recall, he ran a lot of, was it 12 personnel sets out there and so forth. But under Kyle Shanahan, I was at 2 years, I think he was with him. And what Kyle runs, he runs more. Obviously, we know more of his zone scheme. He runs more. He runs more of the stretch run plays and so forth. His offenses are more dynamic. Does he grow into a little more of that? If he grows a little more of that, finds that balance in there to run offense like that here, I think that could be a little more beneficial for us with our receivers that we have. And I think Brian Robinson would probably benefit with a little more of a zone run scheme, maybe. Maybe he's not the true traditional power back that we kind of thought he might have been. But if you get him out in space and get him down where he can run downhill quicker and faster, I mean, that could probably benefit him more. But Thomas, right, from LA, he's the one that intrigues me the most out of the whole group right there because of the McVay tree and the system he runs. I think that would be perfect for what we need out here. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Ron,
I don't have a strong favorite at this point yet.
Yeah.
No.
I just think Ron don't take any time off, Ron. You do not need to be playing golf. It's just terrible. I mean, I don't know why you're not spending 12 hours a day locked in an office reading biographies of coaches.
Yeah, but there are 24 hours in a day, though.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe he needs to spend 20 hours. He needs to sleep a little bit, I guess. But you need to be reading coaching biographies until your head explodes.
Let's say 14 hours a day, because 2 hours to eat, multiple times, and get your 8 hours of rest.
Look, is he dedicated?
He can eat while he's working.
8 hours of rest. I mean,
he can eat while he's working. What are you talking about?
There's rooms full of coaches he could be evaluating.
That's true.
Golf, what a waste of time. Golf.
Well, me, I've always said we should outlaw the sport.
I don't understand why anybody would think that is a thing. Man, that's dumb.
What? That it's a big deal that he was playing golf?
Yes, that's so stupid. That's just
it is dumb.
Yes,
it is dumb.
Yeah, yeah. Although I do think we should outlaw it, but that's a whole different story.
Hey, we talked about live golf on. IJB,
I know. I was listening to IJB. It was a. Yeah. You also talked about. By the way, I never mentioned it. I don't think on the show. The whole New York Post leak about Dan Snyder and Bezos, and if Bezos sells the Post, Dan Snyder might be more willing to sell to Bezos. I'm convinced that came from Dan Snyder. I think he's desperate for a bigger bid, and so he just leaked that to his papers because he loves the New York papers, not the DC papers.
It's possible. So, I wouldn't put anything past Snyder.
Yeah. That's my conspiracy theory.
We did go over all of that, and it's just business. So
yeah.
Go check it out, please.
Yes. All right. Do we want to talk about these last games, or we're right up at an hour?
We got to at least mention them. I mean, look, was the state of referee? There was some poor refereeing in these games.
Oh yeah.
Terrible, right? Was it? I still think the number one worst call in NFL history was the Rams and the Saints a few years ago in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
I don't think the refs tilted. They were terrible in these two games, but I don't think they tilted the scale inappropriately to where like the Chiefs shouldn't have won or the Eagles shouldn't have won.
Well, because there were calls in that Chiefs game that went against the Chiefs that took a touchdown off the board, and it ultimately ended another drive. If it was really rigged or tilted in their favor purposely, as some people are saying, I mean, those calls would have never have happened. I just think the officials having to deal with the adaptation of the rule book over the last 5, 6, maybe 10 years, more so over the last 5 years, some of these calls, like for what a catch is and so forth. I mean, these officials probably have no idea how to define half these rules anymore. I mean, we have like amendments and then subsets to those amendments, and it's just like, well, this one right here, this could affect this particular rule if it's in it. I'd say, come on, stop. It's just
They
so
need attorneys
complicated.
to tell them what the rules mean.
Well, they're all attorneys, and that's the problem in the first place, maybe.
A lot of them are attorneys, actually.
Yes. Attorneys love to make laws more complicated. What they need is some jughead to just be like, nope, this is a catch.
I keep telling you, Alex, it's career preservation.
I understand it is. It's like the old saying about why nuclear engineers don't want solar power or wind turbines. It's too easy. They get bored.
I got my questions about the officiating. I really didn't like I had my money on the Eagles and the Bengals. All right. And to what y'all said, I'm not gonna rehash everything, but even in the Niners and Eagles game, I'm like, bro, like some of the stuff that the Eagles are getting and have gotten away with, even like it's not fair on both sides, but like some of the stuff that they were getting away with, I was questioning, and it was the same way that I got into the later game. I'm like, yo, I don't remember ever having a weekend where officiating like was overwhelmingly like poor across the board in both games. Like it was a storyline, and I think you can't avoid that. When like after the game is over, you can't avoid like how loud the job that they did from the fact that they missed some calls or they failed to like properly identify something, or even with the extra down that they gave Kansas City. I think that they played it right. Like technically you're doing a do-over because the play was supposed to be dead, but like a result happened and you all were really, you meaning the refs, like this is a mistake that you all made, and like why should the Bengals be penalized for a mistake that you all made and now they got to run it back? So it was like several things, but that was the main thing that at the top of my head. I just didn't. It was so overwhelmingly bad this weekend that I cannot understand how they were even in position in the championship game to officiate that.
Yeah, it's pretty shameful. Hopefully they can get better in the Super Bowl.
Well, I think the thing that every Washington fan was alerted to right away, of course, was how does Hussey, who is and John Hussey, I think, right, the one ref who screwed up that Washington Giants game so badly.
Is he the one who had the missed PI call in the end zone?
Well, he was the head official for that game, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he was then the head official for the Eagles game. Makes
a lot more sense now, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, like how, like we've always been told there's if they screw up in the regular season, it hurts them in the postseason. Obviously, it doesn't.
Although I will say this, I mean, far be it for me to defend the refs, but I do think that I don't know if they're necessarily less talented now than they were, but the replays are so much better now, and the camera angles are so much better.
Mm.
You can really see absolutely everything, whereas that wasn't the case years ago. So, I mean, they might have been missing these calls all along, and we just never knew it. And the other thing is what Dave said, which is the rules are so complicated now. Mm-hmm. Like, I personally drives me crazy dissecting what a catch is. It's like when you have 2 feet down with their hands on the ball in the end zone, that's a touchdown. I don't care what happens when you fall and the ball does something when you're falling out of bounds. I don't really care. Those kind of rules have become just insanely complicated, it seems like. And that wasn't necessarily the case before. So I don't know if it's a case of them not being as good. It's just a combination of we can see a lot more and the rules are a lot more.
Yeah. No, I mean, those are definitely big factors, both of them. And then, the little things like the unwillingness of the NFL to change things, like allowing you to challenge.
Or even admit a mistake.
Right. Right.
Partly how to solve this. I've always said this. I think absolutely everything on the field of play should be reviewable. There should not be a circumstance that's not reviewable. Don't give them more challenges. Keep your 3 challenges, but every single thing ought to be reviewable. I don't know why there's non-reviewable events. I think that's also dumb.
No, I'm with you. That and the thing that they did in the XFL that everyone loved, have one official who's part of the game, part of the crew, who's the eye in the sky guy, and he explains what they're looking at in these replays.
Okay, that's never, ever, 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 ever going to happen. You want to know why?
Because it costs the NFL money?
Well, yes, but betting, okay? So if you have the NFL explaining things live on the air and it affects betting, that's going to cost a lot of people money, and it could potentially cost the NFL money. So I don't think they might have an eye in the sky talking to people, but it's not going to be ever on the air like that. That's as their legal counsel, I would suggest to them that that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that they're so tied in with the sports betting now is also worrying to the integrity of these games.
Sure.
At this
point. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a whole nother. That's an IJB topic.
It is.
Well, just like that whole eye in the sky would have caught that 4th and 6 the Eagles went for and Devontae Smith. That was definitely not a catch. Before the Eagles got a chance to snap that ball, have someone sit there, call in, stop the play, pull back, and here's why.
Look,
from New York or wherever.
The good news that happened out of this weekend is that Trent Williams doesn't get in the Super Bowl, and that makes me happy.
Oh, by the way, him picking another playoff fight.
Yep. Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. He threw that guy like a nothing, you know?
I don't know. I just have it out for Trent Williams. I can't with him.
And I think I'm going to establish an over-under for Lane Johnson for false starts. I think he had like 9 of them in a game, and not one of them was called.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
By the way, I saw a headline today that somebody on the Eagles got charged with murder.
What?
Eagles. Yeah, let me pull it up here real charge.
All right. Find it and then we're done. That's the end of the show. We'll end with murder.
Oh, it was rape. Hey. It was rape and kidnapping. It was Josh Sills got charged with rape and it wasn't murder. It was rape and kidnapping. So hopefully they won't need Josh Sills because he might be tied up.
Josh Sills?
Yeah.
What? I don't even know who that is.
Josh, this is courtesy of the Mercury News. Eagles player Josh Sills was charged Wednesday with rape and kidnapping near his Ohio hometown less than 2 weeks before his team will play in the Super Bowl. The incident was December 5th, 2019. Guernsey County Sheriff this is in Ohio. Summoned to appear in Guernsey County on September 16th or February 16th, 4 days after the Super Bowl. So now the Eagles backup offensive lineman. So the Eagles will have to decide whether to inactivate him or let him play.
Oh no, he's already inactivated. I see that.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Smart thing to do.
Yes. Don't have a guy facing rape trials on your football team, Houston.
The people in Houston down here are all excited about D'Amico Ryans as the coach.
Good for them. I'm happy for them.
Hey, he was the ODC in San Francisco.
Yeah. All right, that should wrap us up on this show. Jamal, good talking to you again. I'll just say that.
Absolutely, man. I had some fun tonight, so I appreciate y'all boys again, Steve, Alex, and the guy who replaced me. So Dave.
Oh, trust me, I didn't replace you. I'm just filling in, doing what I can.
Yeah. No one ever replaces anybody.
It's great having both of you here.
Yes, good having you guys on. All right, next week we'll be talking Super Bowl, and we'll actually talk about those games, not just the reffing, I guess.
Maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
And I wanted to Daron Payne. I agonized over
keep
Daron
wanting
Payne's
to do Daron Payne,
and I keep forgetting. We're going to talk about
a lot.
Payne. Yes.
Yeah.
He will.
All right. Later, guys.